Bang! And we are back. A very exciting guest is just about to join us. Since reading the Bitcoin white paper back in 2012, he has been fascinated by the possibilities of blockchain. Having been involved with startups his entire career, he founded BlockDown to help other people track the growth and application of this revolutionary technology. He has interviewed and learned from some of the top minds in the blockchain space and is always enthusiastically sharing his passion and insights at events wearing his signature wooden bow tie. He is obsessed with making the world a better place, and his mantra is just do it. The title of his talk is The Future of Blockchain. Where do we go from here? He is my friend here in Amsterdam and a funny cat. Please put your virtual hands together for Jonathan Knegtel.
Thank you very much, Chris. An absolute pleasure. And actually, my wooden bow tie is in the office, so unfortunately, I don't have it while here in isolation. So today I'm without the wooden bow tie, but trust me, it will be back soon enough.
Fantastic, man. Great to have you on the show. I'll give it up and let's go.
Thanks a lot, Chris. So I'm just going to share my screen here and let's jump right to it. So as Chris said, my name is Jonathan Knegtel, and I'm going to be talking to you about the future of blockchain. I am the CEO of BlockDown, and that's where we've been tracking the space for almost 2 years now. And so I want to start by saying, before we're going into the future, I think we need to take a look into the past. And that's because history doesn't repeat itself necessarily, but it very often rhymes. And this is very important when we're looking at the macro level of kind of where the world is going over the coming years. And if we take a model that's from Carlota Perez that looks at the intersection of technology and financial capital, we can see that we go through these periods of a maturity of the previous surge, which has been the internet and communication, but we also have the eruption, frenzy, synergy, and maturity phase of the next technological revolution. Now, in 2008 or even 2007, where Estonia started using blockchain for their government, and in 2008, when we had the Bitcoin kind of white paper come along, we go through this phase of frantic building and experimentation with the technology. But we're all sitting here in the blockchain space and the crypto space saying, but where is the real application of this technology? We don't yet have large-scale rollout, and that's because we haven't yet hit this synergy phase. And what's important is we have to see how we're going to move through this turning point. And what's required is this kind of institutional recomposition or integration of the technology. Now, we're going to be revisiting this later, but I wanted to show you first. And the world is more complex than ever, as the amount of data that's being produced is now in the, let's say tens of zettabytes of information, which is huge. And that's where the EU classifies data as the lifeblood of economic development. Just want to say that again. Data is the lifeblood of economic development. And to provide a little bit more context to this, they say, over the last few years, digital technologies have transformed the economy and society, affecting all sectors of activity and the daily lives of all Europeans, and I would actually say not just Europeans, everyone around the world. And data has been at the center of this transformation, and more is to come. Data is very important because it moves through various systems, from A to B, or Alice to Bob, as we all know in the crypto space. And effectively what happens is each entity is taking a cut that can verify the data. They then transfer the data or process the data, where they then move and run kind of algorithms on top of that to get a desired result or to provide a service. But what's happened with data as we've moved from paper-based systems into mainframe systems is there has been a crazy, complex, and expensive process of the standardization of this data. And what's been very relevant is not only now is it coming from communities or local governments or local companies, but these now span the entire world as we move across into this globalization and multicultural environments. We all know that the world works and is structured pretty much like this. And at some point during any transaction, it tends to go through some trusted third party. Doesn't matter if it's just data or a transaction that's happening. And that's where I like to always say, when was the last time you used a trusted third party? We're using Zoom to do this call, which is facilitating this conference call right now, or MasterCard the last time you made a payment, or Facebook when you last spoke to your friends, or you used WhatsApp or Instagram, or even iCloud where you stored your data. These are all services that provide effectively a peer-to-peer marketplace where you can share information with other people. And if we go back a little bit to how a transaction actually works, it goes from a sender bank, payment system, corresponding bank, all the way through. And this is a process that's very typical in a cross-border payment transaction. But there are so many intermediaries in this process. That's why these processes take so long. There's a lot of data verification, data standardization that's necessary to happen. And the old system, the traditional economy, as I like to call it, has done a fairly good job more recently of standardizing this information. But that's where the data is always untrusted until it's been verified. No participant trusts the data until it's been settled and agreed internally inside their data silo that it is a source of truth. Now, this raises two big questions. What if data that arguably is representative of someone, you or me, or our consciousness, you could say, is controlled by someone else? Do you really own that data? And most of the time, the answer actually is no. And so then the next question is, does it need to be this way? Well, let's go a level deeper and really define what is data. And in an ideal world, it is a source of truth. And facts and statistics collected together, which is formed of data, can be used for reference or analysis. Now, if we say that data is primarily the very first and lowest level resource of the new economy that we are using, as we defined as the lifeblood of economic activity, that's where, if we look throughout into the past, we can see that where we have big steel, they effectively managed to mine the raw resource of iron, turn that into steel, and they had effectively a monopoly position, which only lasted so long. But what happened was steel became really a core part of our daily lives where we no longer pay attention to it. The same with oil, the real resource being oil. They extracted it, they shipped it around the world, and that powered the next technological revolution. Now we have big data where the large data companies have managed to effectively form the monopoly on the aggregation, extraction of data, to which they then use to participate and effectively help control the global economy. And exploited is really a word of making use of that raw resource. And if we look at companies like Amazon, Alphabet, Facebook, Alibaba, Tencent, and Visa, these are all data companies effectively that facilitate peer-to-peer transaction or facilitate a service where you are looking for information and they help you distill that information to something that gets it to you instantly and is accurate, quote unquote. So that's where, if we look at all these modern technologies that we've all been promised are the fourth industrial revolution, are the future of humanity, that's where we can see that all of these world-changing technologies all use data. AI is great for interpreting large data sets. IoT generates large data sets. And artificial and virtual reality allow us to interact with that data through new forms of kind of interface technology. But if there is such huge amounts of data, and we already know that data is being exploited by the few, where people are not owning it, but it's the lifeblood of economic activity, the most important question that we constantly should be asking ourselves is, where is the data management technology? Well, luckily, we're in the right place at the BlockDown conference today, and that's because blockchain is fundamentally, at the lowest level, just a data management technology. And luckily, this data management shift is already underway, where we've gone from paper to mainframes and punch cards, where we've now we move to databases, and now we're moving to the next generation of data management, which runs on distributed ledger technology, blockchain technology, or network ledgers, which is, I find, one of the more accurate terms to use in the space. So we're moving from, instead of one entity saying whether data is right or wrong, we're actually moving to create a shared set of truths of which anyone can consistently reference as long as they have the right access permissions. And this means that we can start to build and maintain a common understanding of the world that we all reside in. And data management enables some of the core foundational, let's say, interactions and documents that are required for humanity to continue to operate and be efficient. Recording of transactions, recording of ownerships, if we're thinking about housing or maybe even loans, and records of certification, if we're looking at educational certificates, for example. And that's where, if we look at how the world right now is, there's all of these uninteroperable systems, and there aren't even shared sources of truth, and to find sources of truth can be incredibly difficult. So I want to take a simple approach to what defines a DLT or a network ledger, which is effectively you have a set of rules like the Bitcoin blockchain. You then have the implementation, which is all the development that's gone around the Bitcoin ecosystem and what's on GitHub and what's running the nodes and what's running the wallets. And then you have a network of people that agree that that implementation is the correct implementation of that rule set. Now, this three-step approach to defining what is a distributed ledger or a network ledger is very interesting because it's also very comparable to how the physical world runs. If you look at the US, you have the US Constitution, which is its rule set. You have the implementation, which is the US legal system. And then you have the network of people that by partaking in that legal system agree that it is the correct implementation of that rule set. But that's where, when we're running on code, it's not so much open for interpretation, but it runs automatically, as we know through things like smart contracts. So if we say that we want this world of shared sources of truth and we want this to happen, we're all looking at this and saying, okay, well, really, where is this blockchain adoption? Why is this not everywhere right now? Well, I'm here today to tell you that it's actually starting to happen increasingly, month over month. But it's important that we first split crypto and blockchain. Crypto's use case primarily at the moment is focused on DeFi and currency as a medium of exchange. And it's traditionally been defined as a system of money for general use in a particular country. But what's interesting about crypto is obviously it doesn't really respect borders. So we are in the beginning phases of the first step towards a truly global currency. From an institutional perspective, crypto is not yet trusted and safe, and due to the instability and volatility of the market, which, given all the recent events around COVID, is a statement that is also comparable to the traditional economy, is starting to increase as a trusted and safe asset. But that's where, most importantly, as I've heard a lot during this conference, it's about verify, don't trust, and truly having ownership over your assets. And if we then look at blockchain, we look at the blockchain use case as data management and creating a shared set of truths between parties, not just about money, but of information and data itself. And as companies in their more permissioned environments share control of the network, there's also an increased share of trust in the information that is stored there. If we look at some of the numbers around blockchain adoption, Gartner predicts that by 2030, we're going to have $3.1 trillion worth of business value that's going to be stored inside these DLT networks. And Deloitte, in their survey last year, said that 86% of large companies believe that blockchain technology is broadly scalable. This is not people like you and I from the crypto ecosystem, but large institutions. And some research from Outlier Ventures that says since 2013, there has been $23.7 billion raised in the blockchain ecosystem, which includes crypto. But is blockchain really being used? Well, these are three headlines that I pulled recently from the news, and that's where it says DLT Ledger's supply chain platform has been in production for 18 months and processed more than $3.3 billion worth of deals. Other multinationals have filed 212 blockchain patents in China in 2020, which shows that they think that they can make money off of this. And HSBC has put 10 billion of private placements on R3/4 blockchain. And here is some of the research that we did recently that shows we have companies like Facebook, MasterCard, Samsung, T-Mobile, HSBC are all moving their blockchain pilots into production. If we also look at trade finance, we can see that there are huge companies, including ones like Shell, ING, KBC Bank, as well as DNB here in Europe, that's effectively using this technology to enable seamless trade from around the world. And if we start to map the technology that these companies are actually adopting, what we can see is they're not only using private chains like Hyperledger Fabric, but they're also starting to innovate on more open networks like Ethereum. Of the stable coins, this is research from 2019, 66 of them are currently live, with more coming out seemingly every single month at this point. And of remittance, which is cross-border payments, we're seeing more and more companies using this technology to facilitate these transactions, leading to lower costs and faster transaction times. And this is some research from the Topio Networks in San Francisco, where they're looking at creating market maps of the industry. And that's where I think I'm happy to show this, to show that it's actually starting to become too much to show on one image. And then comes the real institutional adoption, which is central bank digital currencies. And only over the last few months, we've seen announcements of the digital dollar. I think yesterday or 2 days ago, the People's Bank of China moving into pilot phase and potentially very close to production. The idea of a euro coin for Europe and India. This means that actually 3.8 billion people, almost half the world's population, may soon have easy access to a form of digital currency that could be the large-scale adoption moment that we've been waiting for. So if we talk about the data layer and why this is relevant, what we're starting to see is we're moving from the traditional economy from a corporate perspective, where they're moving away from dumb assets, trust enabled by third parties, and information asymmetry, where we're moving to a digital economy to smart assets, where assets, depending on certain conditions, can effectively execute themselves, where trust is provided by network consensus, and thus we get more information symmetry. But that's where we have to cross this chasm now. And we have to ensure that the value proposition of this technology is there and is trusted, because that's where we now need to move into large-scale adoption for this data layer to really take place and for us to really feel the effects of it in our economy. And so if I go back to this diagram, we want to move from a system that very much looks like this to a system that looks like this, where we're all referencing effectively a trusted data layer to participate and collaborate in our industries. And if we look at the traditional economy with $127 trillion worth of stuff, let's say, of capital, that's where we need to move into the digital economy, into the Web 3.0. And so what we're aiming for is, over the coming years, is effectively this migration of assets from one economy to another, where the end result should start to be something like this, where the traditional economy and the traditional stack that it runs on will slowly be phased out as companies effectively don't have a choice but to start to participate in this Web 3.0 environment. This is very interesting if we look at Metcalfe's law, where the value of the network, if we say the Web 3.0 network is proportional to the square of the size or the amount of nodes on the network, is at some point we're going to be hitting this critical mass point. And that's really going to be the moment of large-scale adoption, where we can now say blockchain is a core component of the economic industry. So great. We've understood a little bit about where we are in the past, what's happening at the moment. There is large-scale adoption and much innovation happening in the crypto space, and really this institutional adoption from a corporate perspective. But what's going to happen in the future? Well, again, coming back to this turning point, if we look at a more advanced part of this diagram, we can see that this institutional recomposition is here. So we need to hit this point for this technology to be rolled out for us to really feel the true economic effects. And in this model, two things are required for this to happen. The first one is regulation, and the second one is understanding of society and a fundamental perspective shift of how they perceive the technology. Well, if we look at regulation, the fact that CBDCs are starting to become a thing, see a certain spelling mistake, oops, that's where this is one of the key aspects of effectively providing an on-ramp for companies, governments, and the consumers to get into this environment. And there's interesting academic research that is saying potentially code is law as a form of regulation whereby technology is used to enforce existing rules rather than traditional paper-based court systems. And it's only through pushing the boundaries that rules are set and clarified. Now, that's where regulation, I applaud for their watch and wait approach, because this has actually allowed rapid experimentation in the crypto industry, which has gone through those 3 steps that I mentioned earlier of testing out new rule sets, new implementation, and specifically in the crypto space, they've left it up to the people to decide which networks they want to join, and has thus increased the value of those technologies. And in regards to the perspective shift, if we look at CBDCs, this is huge. A consumer is now going to look and start to use this technology by default as this is rolled out. And that's where the adoption and the experimentation of blockchain, as we've seen with things like the COVID response, where blockchain has been one of the core technologies that people have looked at to see how we can best track how this virus is spreading around the world. But what's the point of all of this? Like, why should this happen? Why, looking into the future, is blockchain such an important thing? Well, it's about moving data out of silos. It's about creating a more secure and transparent data environments. And arguably, and this is what I really would like people to take away from this today, is it's the first step of many leading to a more inclusive and trusted world. And that's why what it causes is a simpler world caused by the simplification of accessing and computing on sources of truth, more transparency, allowing us to have better technology to track things like climate change and individual climate impact, and potentially improving accessibility to things like universal basic finance. And how this space is going to be structured, and I think this is a model that people can take away from this, is right now what we're seeing is large-scale blockchain adoption, both in the crypto world again and in the institutional world around finance. How am I moving my assets from my old technology stack to a new blockchain-driven technology stack? And then what's happening is all of these other use cases like supply chain, agriculture, energy, manufacturing, public administration, mobility, and health are now all going to start to create these data environments. And we can point to blockchain projects that are already building in each one of these sectors. And as this happens, it's going to lead to more interoperability to how data effectively is managed everywhere around the world. And if we take Gartner's hype cycle, we are well through this trough of delusionment at the moment. And I'm calling it right now that we are entering the slope of enlightenment that potentially is even being increased by by what's happening in the turbulent times that we're experiencing in the global economy. And last final few slides is around, as humanity relies more on technology, fundamentally, the data underpinning it must be trusted, because that's where effective resource management should be the aim, where the digital world is really working for us for the physical world. As we take information from the physical world, we put it into the digital world, which helps us provide services for the physical world. Again, things like Deliveroo, it's exactly what it does, is we need to ensure that as we use more and more and we rely heavier and heavier on technology, that we need to ensure that this information and data is managed in the right way, because fundamentally, all technology requires data to operate. So the closing statements are, we're aiming for simplification, we're approaching the synergy phase of this technology. And I think for people watching this, and if you're looking at the companies or you're looking to disrupt companies, is really asking yourself, where is this data being used? And how is your data set providing value to your underlying service quality? Because arguably, a lot of the data sets that people find proprietary to them at the moment aren't necessarily really driving value. So my last question to all of you is, how are you participating in the future? Thanks a lot.
Jonathan, absolutely incredible. We've had a lot of great presentations. I have to say that one was my favorite. And that's saying a lot because we've had some super presentations. Listen, man, we've had a ton of questions come in, but we only have a little bit of time. And there's a ton of great questions, but none better than mine. So I'm going to ask two questions. First one, listen, data management is your life and it's your passion. And BlockData, the company that you have founded, I am subscribed, and I'm on there all the time to get access to valid, real, great information and data. With your presentation, we didn't learn what BlockData is, how it works, why it's important that people subscribe to BlockData, and how it's different. So if you can just give the lowdown on BlockData, that would be fantastic.
Sure. So that's where in the blockchain space and in the crypto space specifically, we have a lot of information around pricing and we have a lot of information around on-chain activity. But that's where, as I described in the presentation, it's not just about the crypto space, but it's really about this institutional aspect of blockchain adoption. So what we're doing at BlockData is we're trying to help people understand not only what these projects are priced at, but what are they doing? Who's working on them? Who have they partnered with? Where have they been mentioned in the news? But not just crypto again, but really also the corporate angle. So that's where we try to provide context to people when they're thinking about this technology, you know, what is out there, and really make people data driven.
Fantastic. Well, there's one thing you can update with Effect.ai. We have a United Nations partnership, and soon, I'll call you first for the breaking news, but we might be working with Acoin and Acon in the near future. Listen, another thing I wanted to ask real quick, because we only have a few moments left, if you can do it pretty quick. So we see how many big corporates and how many governments and everybody who's adopting blockchain right now. It's across everywhere. Can you give some insights or some theories on what you think the impact of COVID-19 is going to be on the adoption of blockchain for all of these corporates and
yeah, most certainly. So that's where I think from our perspective, what we see is that obviously a lot of companies are effectively cutting costs at the moment. And they are looking to simplify their existing businesses. And that's where, as long as these companies are looking critically at data as one of the key parts of their business, actually adopting blockchain could lead to a reduction in costs and reduce their overhead when it comes to managing this data. Now, I don't expect this to happen straight away over the next 2 or 3 months, for example, but over the next year or 2 years, we're probably going to expect an increased rate of adoption of this technology as the tooling becomes better and better, where these companies are effectively going to start looking at this and saying, well, it now really doesn't make sense that I don't integrate this technology, purely because it saves costs, it drives higher levels of efficiency, and it allows me to participate in potentially new businesses that I hadn't even considered before.
Jonathan, my man, thank you very much for joining BlockDown 2020. Hope to see you soon after I'm out of this lockdown, but today it's BlockDown. Thanks, Jonathan. We'll see you soon, pal.
Thanks a lot, Chris. All the best. Good luck.
See you, man. All right, guys, we're going to go to a quick break, and then we're coming up to today's first panel. It is an all-star lineup. We'll be back right after this.